Well, in the previous session, we made the logo motion intro in this way. But in this session, we want to create the extrude part of the logo motion, where the circle moves from here and erase these letters in order. First of all, I will start from this circle. It stops suddenly. We have to fix it. I select this ball layer and use U to display its keyframes. Here I create a keyframe and move it to the left. And after a few frames, I return it to the original place. And in this way, I create a breaking mode. I can select these three keyframes and slow them down by holding Alt and clicking. After the intro is over, I want the logo motion to be shown for 1 second. Then this circle goes out from here and delete these letters one by one. So here I create a keyframe. I'm going to go forward 10 frames and put this circle here. I go forward 10 frames and bring this circle here. 10 frames later, I put this ball here. 10 frames later, I pass this ball over the exclamation mark. If you look carefully, there is still a ball here. These are related to these tails, which must be linked from the position axis to the main ball so that they move together. I select this layer and hit U to see the keyframes. And I connect the position of this to the position of the main ball. Like this. Close this one. Open this. Press U and do the same for this layer as well. In this way, when the main ball moves, the tail moves with it and don't stop in their place. I do the same for the last layer. Hit U and I connect its position to the position of main ball. This way, when this ball moves, the rest of the ball moves with it. We have animated this so far. For now, we will animate the general animation and then we will add details. Here I move 10 frames forward by pressing Ctrl Shift and right and I cross it over the letter O. Of course, I chose this tail layer by mistake. Press Ctrl Z and select the ball layer and move it like this. I'm going to move forward 10 frames again and move the ball like this and put it here. Ten frames later, I pass this over here. I will cross it exactly in the middle of the letter that later we want to delete it so that we can do it easily. Here, for example. 10 frames later, I move the ball like this. I go forward another 10 frames and pass over this Y as well. Now I zoom out on the timeline. I also drag this to here and hit B to make the work area smaller. Hit space to play the animation. If it moves too slowly, we can adjust its timing and speed. I feel that its speed is too low. I select all these keyframes and hold Alt and move these keyframes. My process for creating logo motion is to create keyframes every 10 frames, and if I feel that the speed is slow, I make it fast this way. Now its speed is almost good. Now we have to convert this linear mode of the movement into a curve. Select this keyframe. We can modify it with the Convert Vertex tool. Like this. Again, click on this point to this handle appear. Try to keep these handles out. Click on this point and soften this handle. Try to put it in the straight line. For example, it is a little crook here. So I will fix it. We have to do this for the rest of the points. Move this point. I select the selection tool and click on it once and move it like this. Try to place the points correctly where the ball passes over the letters. Now this ball is on the right. We have to move this handle so that it passes exactly over this letter. I do the same for this lower handle. Because this letter is supposed to be eaten by the ball, it must pass exactly over the letter. I put this on full to see it with the better quality. Adjust this handle like this. Also move this bottom handle, or I move this point itself with the selection tool. Again, we can bring this upper point to the right, like this. The ball must pass through the middle of the letter O. I curve it with the Convert Vertex tool and move these handles. I do the same for the second O. I can move this point a little, like this. I also modify this edge with the Convert Vertex tool and move its handle and adjust it in this way. I do the same for A. I'll convert it to the curve and adjust it like this. And finally, it's time for Y to pass over it. And here this ball should disappear. Hit Shift S and create a keyframe. Here I will scale it to 0. I move this keyframe and move it forward. Those balls you see are related to tail layers. We can use opacity to hide these layers. Press Shift T and keyframe the opacity. Here the opacity is 100 and here I will make it 0, like this. Now we need to connect the opacity of these layers to the opacity of this main ball. Hit T. In this way, when the opacity of the main layer becomes 0, the rest of the layers will also be hidden. I do the same for the rest of the layers. Hit T and connect its opacity to the opacity of the main layer. And in this way, all the layers will be hidden. We can bring these two keyframes closer together to make them disappear faster. Now we need to adjust the speed of the ball. We can choose these three keyframes and I will make them easy ease with F9. I want this fourth keyframe to stop a bit in the air. I move it to the right with the motion tree tool and adjust the speed like this. And for the rest of the keyframes, because I want them to move quickly, I select all of them and select Rove Across Time. I will play it once. I normalize this frame and I play the animation again. No, it's not good. I will rove across this keyframe again. It's better now. I increase the speed of these three keyframes. Here the ball maxes a lot. It shouldn't be like this. I normalize this keyframe. I also normalize this frame. And I play the animation. You have to play with this option by trial and error to get the best result. Its speed is still high. I select these keyframes and move to the left. I also rove across this keyframe. It's better now, but I will increase its speed again. I also closer these keyframes so that the ball disappears after the motion is finished. I want the exclamation mark to move a bit after the ball moves. I select its layer, hit U to see the keyframes, press Shift P and add position. After a few frames, it calms down a little. And is put back in its place. This is called secondary action, which is one of the rules of animation. And the secondary movement happens following a main movement. The primary motion is the motion of the ball, and the secondary motion is the motion of the exclamation mark. We can also add bend. I create a keyframe. In this frame, I bend it a little. And finally, it returns to normal. We can overlap it a little. I move these keyframes forward to make the movement more natural. You see? We can select these keyframes and I will make them easy ease with F9. Now we are going to remove the letters when hitting. I want the exclamation mark to shrink a bit when it hits the ball. So I hit Shift S to add the scale. For example here, when the collision took place. So its previous frame shouldn't move. I create another keyframe. Here I make it small from X-axis. This is the state of being eaten by the ball. This letter should be removed when the ball reaches here. So in this frame I press Alt close bracket. And in this way we delete the letter. We must repeat the same for the letter O. I want it to be slightly scaled where the ball hits the letter O. I choose the O2 layer, hit S and create a keyframe. One frame before that, I create another keyframe. And exactly at the time of impact, I stretch it a little. For example, I subtract 20 from X and add 20 to Y. After this layer should be removed. Press Alt close bracket and delete this layer here. For this also in the same way. Here I hit S and create a keyframe. I also create a keyframe for the previous frame. Subtract 20 from X and add 20 to Y. Of course, I have to subtract 20 from it to make it smaller. Like this. You see? This layer should be deleted. So on this frame, I hit Alt close bracket to delete it. This way of working is the same. You have to take your time and do this for all the letters. I also add a scale keyframe for H. In this frame, I subtract 20 numbers from X. Now that it is here, this layer should be deleted. I'm going to press Alt close bracket and delete this layer here. I select layer A in the same way and create a keyframe with S. And I scale it like this. With Alt close bracket, I also remove this layer. I do the same for Y. Here I create a scale keyframe, and in this frame I subtract 20 from X. Of course, we have to change its anchor point before doing this. Press Ctrl Z. I will put the anchor point down here, but before that, check that the animation is not messing up. I think there is no problem. Here I subtract 20 from the X-axis. I forgot to create the scale keyframe. Here I set it to 70. We can move it one frame. When the ball gets here, we can spin it a bit. Hit Shift R and add a rotation keyframe. Rotate it a little as it is being eaten inside. We can also move it a little. Hit Shift P and give it a position. And like in the video, I move it a little so that it fits inside the ball. Here the layer must be deleted. Alt close bracket and delete this layer, as they are really eaten by this ball. If I play the animation, we made it like this. You can also move these keyframes to make the ball disappear faster. I want them to disappear in one frame. I also speed up these keyframes by holding Alt so that the letters disappear faster. I also rove across this keyframe. Now that we have changed the speed of the ball, its timing has improved, but these letters disappear late, so we have to adjust their timing as well. I start with the exclamation mark. We have to move the keyframes and make the layers shorter. I make this layer shorter so that it can be removed faster. We should move the letter O one frame and make it shorter. Sorry, my mistake. We need to move one frame to the left. And I cut the layer like this. We need to do this for all the letters and move the keyframes and play the animation. I move H by 2 frames and make its layer shorter. We have to move the A keyframes a few frames and make its layer shorter. And I do the same for Y. Now if I play the animation, you can see that we managed to make it so beautiful. If I play the animation from the beginning, the animation is almost finished. Now it's time to add some details to make the logo motion more beautiful. To add details, we can use the trim path effect. It is one of the most widely used effects in making motion graphics. Well, I will start from the beginning. No layers should be selected. Press F2 so that no layer is selected. Then I use the pen tool and draw a line like this. I have to draw a straight line. Click here. Hold Shift and draw a straight line like this. We don't need the fill color, and I choose the same color of the ball as the stroke. Now I bring this point a little lower. I click on this point with the selection tool and move it down with Shift. I choose the same color for the stroke. This white layer is slightly shifted. I select it and right click on it and select Fit to Come from the Transform section. Now we have to give it the trim path effect. Select its layer this layer I change its name to tail. Open the stroke section and put the line cap on round cap. With this, both ends of the line are rounded. I want the lower part of the line to be a bit sharp. Open the taper part. I will slightly increase the number of start length. Of course, I have to narrow the end. Increase the end width a little more. Like this. Now we have to use the trim path effect. Choose trim path from this part. And I have to keyframe start and end. I set the start to 100. Move the CTI and set the start to 0. And at the same time, end must be set to 0. Now we have to move the start keyframes a little and overlap it with the end. I also move the end keyframes a little. Move the start a little. Now we can make this line a little bigger. Click on the path part. And make this line a little bigger with the selection tool. You see? I select these keyframes and make them easy ease with F9. We animated a line like this. Now we can make several copies of it. Close these. We can select these two and make group with Ctrl G. I will change its name to middle line. Take a duplicate of this group with Ctrl D and name it right line. I want to have 3 lines. I don't want to animate this line multiple times. I animate it once and duplicate it for the rest of the lines. I will take a duplicate of this again and name it left line. Now we have 3 copies. I select the right line and move it to the right side with the selection tool and the arrow keys of the keyboard. I will also lower it a little. I do the same for the left line. I take it to the left and bring it down a little. Now I have 3 lines that moves like this. It comes here and ends. We can also copy this layer when it goes down. I click on it and duplicate with Ctrl D. Now we have to rotate this line. We can use plus and minus on the number pad of the keyboard. If we hold Shift, the rotation speed will increase. I turn it exactly like this. Now we have to move the keyframes. Hit U to see the keyframes. I choose these. Or we can move the layer itself. For example, I want to start from here. Drag this layer and place it here. The lines on its back appear. I want this layer to disappear here, that is, right before hitting the ground. Press Alt close bracket and this way the layer will be shorter. We can remove it one from earlier. In this way I make the layer shorter. Here we can select the ball layer and move its position a little lower. I select this part with the selection tool and bring it down with the arrow keys. With this, the ball hits exactly under the letter A. Here, when the ball hits the letter A, I want these lines appear. We can copy this top layer. Hit Ctrl D. I will move it and place it here. Now we have to rotate these lines. It was coming from top to bottom. Now we need to rotate it with minus on the numpad. Shift minus, it rotates faster. I will move it and place it here. I also change its color to white. Now we have to shrink the lines because they are too big. I also move it a little. Move the layer one frame. It's good here. Now I have to shorten the lines. Select the pen tool and click once on this line. Then I select the selection tool and by holding shift I select these lines. When I select it, the color inside turns blue. I click on one of them and this way I make them small. For example, till here. With the selection tool, we can move these lines and adjust them in this way. I make this layer longer. Hit U to see keyframes and move them to make them faster. Now I think it was good. We can only select the end keyframes with Shift and move it to the right so that these lines become shorter. I also hit F9 on this keyframe to make it easy ease. You see? In this way, the line becomes shorter and more beautiful. In my opinion, the previous mode was better. So I moved the end keyframe one frame, like this. Now it's great. We can also have these lines on two sides of the letter A as soon as it hits the ground. We can duplicate this layer with Ctrl D. I also like the bottom layer so that I don't move it by mistake. I will move it a little. I also move this layer a little. As soon as the letter A appears, I want these lines to appear. Like this. We can delete one of these lines. I think it is more beautiful this way. I repeat exactly the same for that side. Press Ctrl D to duplicate. I will move it a little. Move the anchor point and place it here. Press Shift negative and rotate this line like this. And I move it and place it here. I also change the angle of this line. I will set its anchor point and place it here. Adjust its angle like this. These things make the animation more interesting. Hit U and move these keyframes to make it happen faster. I do the same for the bottom layer. Again, we can do this operation for the exclamation mark and the letter Y. We can duplicate this layer, Ctrl D. First, I move this layer, and with positive, I rotate it a little. And I put it here. It should appear from here. Set its location and timing. You can adjust this and bring it a little further. Again, we can take a duplicate of this layer and put it for the exclamation point. I move its anchor point, and with the negative we can rotate it. Hit Shift negative to rotate faster. We made this effect once and we can use it for other layers as well. Now, just like the video, set its location and timing. It's great now. So far we have added these details that have made our animation better. Now the details are over. I just need to add details for the ball that has a technique. I will teach you the technique and make a few and leave the rest to you. I want a series of lines to come out of this ball and end somewhere. We can use the trim path effect like this. In order not to redraw this path with the pen tool, we can copy the path of this ball and apply this effect based on it. We can copy this path from position. Press Ctrl C and copy. This is the direction that ball went. We can convert this path into a stroke. I copy this path. Press F2 so that no layer is selected. Select the pen tool. From here, I draw a path with a white stroke, like this. I make the stroke size smaller, for example 6. Open the contents, shape, and path, and then paste the copied path with Ctrl V. You can see exactly the same path that the ball went appeared as a stroke. Now we have to move it and put it in its place. I move it with the selection tool. Now how do we know exactly where to put it? I choose the ball layer very easily. I close these layers. When the ball layer is selected, you can see the path of the ball. You need to move the stroke so that it's exactly on this line. This line should go down a little and to the right. We can move it with the arrow keys. Select the ball layer again to compare their position. I move it a little to the right. I select the ball layer again. It still has to go a little further to the right. a little lower. It is almost good now, but not exactly on the line. I will move it a bit. It is now exactly on the line. If I move the CTI, you can see that the ball goes exactly on the line. I lower the line a little so that the ball passes exactly on the line. In my opinion, its place is good, and the ball moves exactly on the line. Now we need to remove the extra parts of the stroke. Select this layer, change its name to path. For example, we don't need these parts because we created the path before. We need to animate where the ball hits the ground. Click on the path so that the entire path is selected. Then I delete these 2 points with the Delete Vertex tool. Now I want to place it in a layer from here to here and give it a trim path effect. I create a point with the pen tool. We need from here where the ball hits the ground to where I created the point. And I want this liquid to come out. So I will keep these 2 points and remove the rest. But before that, we have to copy the trim path effect of the bottom layer and its stroke and paste it in the new layer, because we changed its stroke and rounded the corners and thinned the initial parts. So I select the trim path and stroke layer with Control and copy it with Control C. Click on the shape layer and press Control V. Hit U to see the keyframes. I delete the stroke of shape layer because we've copied it from the previous layer. This keyframe should appear from where the ball hits the ground. So I select them and move them. Now we need to delete the extra parts, but before that we need to copy this shape. As you can see, this shape includes the new stroke and trim path effect, which we need to duplicate. We copy it with Ctrl D. Hide shape 2. Open shape 1 and select path. Now as you can see, all points are selected. That is, it has turned blue. We should deselect these 3 points. To do this, select the pen tool and deselect them by holding Shift and clicking. This removes the blue color inside the dots. Now all the points except these 3 are selected. You can delete the selected parts by pressing Delete. Now we only have this path, that the trim path must pass over the path. I move these keyframes. You see this line moving, but its movement is opposite. So I move the end keyframe and put them here. I also move these keyframes a little. Now the movement direction of this line is the opposite, so we have to correct it. From stroke and taper, we must reverse these numbers. For example, set a start to 85 and end to 0. Set a start width to 42 and end to 0. Now we have corrected its path and it moves exactly on this line. This liquid leaves the ball in this way and moves on the path. Now we can determine its timing. Hit U on this layer. Of course, we have nothing to do with shape 2 at the moment. I close this part and open shape 1 again. And in the trim path part, I move these two keyframes forward so that its movement speed is lower. Now this liquid comes out of this ball and moves, which we can determine its timing. We need to do this for all the paths. Well, we did shape 1. We have to do this for shape 2 as well. Unhide it and hide shape 1. Now we have to deselect from this part to this part. Open the path and click on it. Now the whole path is selected. With the pen tool and by holding Shift, we can deselect these points. It is now turns white. Hold Shift and click. The same for this point. Before you erase these lines, we need to get several duplicates of this layer. Because if we delete this stroke, we have to create it again from the beginning. With Ctrl D, I get several duplicates. Now hold Shift again to deselect these points. Of course, you have to hide the rest of the layers, otherwise you won't be able to detect it being deselected correctly. You can see that it's now deselected. Hold Shift and click on this point. Also this point. Now when I press the delete button, all parts are deleted and this part remains. We have to copy the trim path and the stroke related to the shape 1 and paste it in this shape so that we don't have to do these things from the beginning. Ctrl C. In shape 2, I delete these two and paste the new one with Ctrl V. Now this line appears and moves, but we have to adjust its timing. Open the trim path and select and move these keyframes. Adjust its timing so that it looks like the liquid is coming out of the ball. Repeat this for the other shapes as well. You'll learn the technique. I delete the stroke and trim path related to shape 3 Hide shape 2 and unhide shape 3. I select the path of shape 3 and deselect these 2 points by holding Shift. Hit delete. Now I copy the stroke and trim path of shape 2 and paste it on shape 3. Now we have to adjust its timing. This is exactly where the liquid coming out of the bowl. Hide shape 3 and unhide shape 4. Open shape 4 and delete its stroke and trim path. And I choose its path. And by holding Shift, I deselect these 2 points and delete the rest with delete. Open shape 3 and copy the stroke and trim path. And paste it into shape 4. Now I have to adjust its timing. We must continue this process until the end. Hide shape 4 and unhide shape 5. Delete its stroke and trim path. And set its path. By holding Shift and clicking, I deselect these 2 points and hit delete. Copy the stroke and trim path from shape 4 and paste it for the shape 5. The process is the same. Once you learn the technique, you can animate these lines very easily. Of course, we animated once, and we only use the copy-paste method for the rest. The only thing you need to do after paste is to adjust its timing. Hide shape 5 and unhide shape 6. I'll do it for shape 6 and leave the rest up to you because the process is the same. I delete these 2 layers, choose path, hold Shift and click on these 2 points, and press delete. Copy the stroke and trim path from shape 5 and paste them in shape 6. I will adjust its timing now. like this. Well, I'll keep shape 7 for the rest of the path. You must duplicate this layer several times and continue in the same way until the end of the path. I did up to shape 6. Do the rest yourself. Unhide all these layers and play the animation to see what we have done so far. Of course, we have to unhide these shapes till shape 7, because we haven't made them yet. Now if I play the animation frame by frame, you will see that along this path, these liquids come out of the bowl, and we were able to animate these lines so beautifully. This liquid looks like they leave a mark. We can use this technique for the rest of the path. We must use shape 7 from here to here, for example, from here to here, from here to here, here to here separately, and so on from here to here, here to here, and finally from here to here. We should also animate this so that finally this effect of liquid coming out of the bowl can be seen well all part of the path. And this is how we were able to animate this logo motion. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial video and learned a lot of new tips and technique. I know that this logo motion was a little complicated and had many tips and tricks. Be sure to practice until you gain the necessary skills. If you don't succeed once, practice several times. I'm pretty sure you will be able to make this logo motion even better than me. Take care, and I will see you in another tutorial.